I asked my son when the family barbecue was going to be. He answered, "Mom, it was yesterday. We forgot to tell you. There were only important people there." I stayed silent. A week later, he called me. "Mom, I need $10,000 urgent." I replied, "I forgot to tell you. I don't have it." Those words left me paralyzed in front of my kitchen sink. I had the phone pressed to my ear and I felt the air escaping from my chest, like when you get punched in the gut and you are not expecting it. "There were only important people," repeated David, my only son, with that casual tone you use to talk about the weather or to say you forgot to buy milk. Important. I was not important. I looked toward the table where I had left the large bowl with my famous homemade chili, the one David had loved since he was a child. I had prepared it that very morning, thinking about taking it to the family gathering. Next to the bowl was the gift I bought for Mason, my 7-year-old grandson, a remote control car I saw at the mall that cost me 3 weeks of savings, $80 that I set aside penny by penny from my pension. "Mom, are you still there?" David's voice sounded impatient, as if I were the one making a mistake. "Yes, son, I am here." My voice came out calmer than I expected, but inside something was breaking. It was not the first time they had left me out, but this time there was something different in his tone. Something that made me understand that it had not been an oversight. "Well, Mom, you know how Brittany is with gatherings. She wanted it to be something intimate, only close family." He paused. "Anyway, I have to go. I have to take Mason to his swimming lesson." "We will talk later." "Okay." He hung up before I could respond. I stood there frozen with the phone in my hand, watching how the purple hydrangeas in the garden moved with the afternoon wind. This house in the suburbs had been the center of all gatherings for 40 years. Here we celebrated David's birthdays. Here we held the wake for my Robert when he left us 12 years ago. Here Mason took his first steps. And now suddenly I was not close family. Brittany, my daughter-in-law, the woman who entered our family 5 years ago like a fresh breeze, and who little by little turned into a hurricane that pushed me out of my own territory. But that afternoon, in front of that bowl of chili and that undelivered gift, I still did not understand how far her plan went. I walked toward the living room and sat in my usual chair, the one next to the window. From there, I could see my grandmother's antique grandfather clock hanging on the wall, the one that chimed the hours with a special sound that had accompanied my entire life. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. At that time, I should have been arriving at David's house with my food and my hug for Mason. But I was here alone, uninvited. If you ask me what I felt in that moment, I would tell you it was like falling into a very deep well where your own voice bounces back and no one hears you. Because it was not just about a barbecue. It was about a clear message. Your place in this family no longer exists. What I did not know is that this was just the beginning. Because exactly 1 week later, when the phone rang again and I saw David's name on the screen, my life was about to take a turn that I had not imagined even in my worst nightmares. But we will talk about that in a moment. First, I need you to understand who I was before all of this. Because to understand how I fell so low, you need to know from what height I began to crumble. If this story is touching your heart, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you can continue hearing real testimonies like this one. My name is Olivia. I am 68 years old, and for most of my life I was the backbone of my family. I do not say it with arrogance, I say it as a fact. That is how my mother raised me. That is how I lived, and that is how I thought I would die, surrounded by my loved ones, respected, loved. This house where I now live alone was inherited from my parents. It is an old Victorian construction with high ceilings, mosaic floors, and a garden that my father planted with his own hands. The purple hydrangeas that I love so much were a gift from my mother when I turned 15. "So you always have color in your life, honey," she told me. 53 years passed, and those hydrangeas continue to bloom every spring stronger than ever. Here I married Robert. Here David was born here. I built my sewing workshop in what used to be the laundry room. For 30 years, I worked sewing prom dresses, christening suits, alterations of all kinds. My hands were always busy, always creating something beautiful for someone. Robert was an electrician. A hard-working man, quiet, one of those who do not promise you the moon, but build you a solid roof. He died of a heart attack 12 years ago when David was 30. It was so sudden that we could not even say goodbye. One Tuesday, he was fixing the wiring in an office building downtown, and by Wednesday at dawn, he was gone. I was left a widow at 56 with a paid-off house, some savings, and an adult son who was already working as an engineer in a construction company. I thought the worst had passed. I thought I had weathered the biggest storm of my life. How wrong I was. During those years of widowhood, my house became the meeting point. Every Sunday I made pot roast, lasagna, or barbecue. My sister Grace would come with her children, David's cousins, and they filled the garden with laughter. Mason, who was just a baby, then slept in my arms while I chatted with the neighbors on the porch. Brittany had not appeared on the scene yet. My grandmother's wall clock marked each of those gatherings with its special chime. That clock is more than 100 years old. It is made of hand-carved mahogany with gold Roman numerals and a pendulum that swings with a hypnotic rhythm. My grandmother brought it from the old country when she got married, and she always said that as long as that clock kept telling the time, the family would remain united. I believed in that promise, as if it were a sacred pact. David met Brittany at a work conference 6 years ago. She was a public relations officer for an events company, pretty self-assured with that type of confidence that comes from being raised in a wealthy family. From the first time I brought her home, I noticed something in her gaze when she walked through the rooms. It was not admiration, it was evaluation. "What a big house for you alone, Olivia." She told me the second time she came calling me by my first name, as if we were already close friends. "Does it not scare you to be here with so much empty space?" "It is my home," I answered with a smile. "All my memories are here." "Memories do not pay the property tax or the electric bill," she replied with a laugh that pretended to be funny, but that left a bitter taste in my mouth. David defended her. "Brittany is right, Mom. You should consider something smaller, easier to maintain." It was the first time my son suggested that I leave the house of my life. It would not be the last. They got married 5 years ago in an elegant ballroom at the country club, which cost a fortune. Brittany wanted everything big. Imported dress banquet for 200 people, a live band. I contributed $10,000 from my savings to help with the expenses money I earned sewing for 2 full years. "We're going to pay you back, Mom," promised David. "I'm still waiting." After the wedding, things started to change little by little, so slowly that at first I did not notice. The Sunday gatherings became bi-weekly, then monthly, until they practically disappeared. Brittany always had an excuse. Mason had activities. She had courses. David was tired. "Why don't you come to our house instead, Olivia?" she suggested. But when I went, I felt like just another visitor, not like the grandmother of the family. My sewing workshop was still running, although with fewer clients than before. The ladies of the neighborhood still looked for me, but my hands were no longer as fast as when I was 40. Even so, that space was my refuge, my place where I was still Olivia the seamstress, the one who solved problems with needle and thread. I kept my tools in a wooden box that Robert made for me when we celebrated 10 years of marriage. Inside, I have scissors of 3 sizes, needles of all thicknesses, colored threads that look like an organized rainbow. Every time I open that box, I feel that Robert is still here, taking care of me. But loneliness has a weight that no toolbox can sustain. And then came the call about the barbecue, that "we forgot to tell you there were only important people," that split me in two. That night, after hanging up with David, I stayed looking at the bowl of chili that no one would taste. I poured it down the sink and cried while the water carried away the meat, the beans, the spices. I felt I was throwing away something more than food. I was throwing away the illusion that I still mattered. What I did not know was that in exactly 7 days, David would call me again. But this time, it would not be to exclude me from a gathering. It would be to ask me for $10,000 with the shamelessness of someone who thinks I am an unfeeling ATM. And there, facing that request, something inside me finally woke up. The exclusion did not arrive all at once like a slamming door. It arrived like mold on the walls, slow and visible, until one day you turn around and the whole structure is rotten. After the call about the barbecue, I started remembering other times, small moments that at the time I justified with excuses, but now placed one after another, formed a pattern that turned my stomach. Mason's 6th birthday, for example. I spent 3 days baking his favorite cake. 3 layers of chocolate with fresh strawberries and whipped cream. I decorated it with edible toy cars that I made with fondant because Mason was obsessed with cars. I arrived at his party with the cake in my hands, excited to see his little face light up. But when I entered the garden of his house, there was already another cake on the table. A huge one from an expensive bakery downtown with a superhero design in 3 tiers. "Oh, Olivia, we didn't know if you were going to be able to come." Brittany told me with that smile I was starting to know very well. "That is why we ordered this other one. But what a nice detail you brought. We can save it for later." Mason did not even turn to look at my cake. All the children were around the superhero one, screaming with excitement. I stood there holding my homemade cake like a fool, feeling that my 3 days of work were worth nothing. "You didn't know if I was coming to my own grandson's birthday?" I asked David later when I found him alone in the kitchen. "It's just that you never confirm on time, Mom," he answered without even looking me in the eyes. Brittany needs exact numbers to plan things well. That was the first time I felt they were turning me into a problem to be solved, not the grandmother of the family. Then came Christmas last year. We had always celebrated Christmas Eve at my house. It was tradition. I made the turkey, Grace brought the stuffing, and between all of us we set up the dinner, while the men set up the nativity scene. At 11 at night, we opened gifts under my tree, that artificial pine I have had for 20 years, that is already half worn but holds more memories than any new tree. But that year, at the beginning of December, David called me. "Mom, this year, we are going to do dinner at Brittany's parents' house. Her mom is in delicate health and cannot travel much. And why don't you bring her to my house? There is space for everyone here." It is just that. "Everything is already planned there, Mom. They already ordered the food, they have everything ready. Next year we will do it at your house, I promise." I spent Christmas Eve watching holiday specials on television, eating leftover chicken that I reheated in the microwave. My grandmother's clock chimed 12 times, and every ring reminded me that I was completely alone. Grace invited me to her house, but I told her no. My pride was still intact back then. I still believed that if I acted strong, if I showed no weakness, things would return to normal. How naive I was. In January, Brittany had her birthday. David organized a lunch at an Italian restaurant in the downtown district. They invited me, of course, but when I arrived, I realized they had seated me at the end of the table, far from the birthday girl, between people I did not know. Brittany was in the center, surrounded by her friends, her mom, her sister. They laughed. Toasted took photos that I later saw on Facebook with hashtags like "my family" and "best people." I did not appear in any photo. When the check came, David approached me. "Mom, can you support us with your share? It is $100. $100 for a meal where they did not even pay attention to me, where I was just another piece of furniture in the decoration. I paid, of course I paid. Because that is what mothers do. Right? We pay, we stay silent, we endure, hoping that someday they will return to us, even if it is a crumb of the love we gave. But the straw that broke the camel's back was in March, 3 months before the call about the barbecue. Brittany organized a party at her house to celebrate her promotion at work. According to what I learned later from Grace, she invited 40 people, family, friends, co-workers. There was catering and open bar live music. I found out through Facebook. I saw the photos 2 days later. There was my sister Grace with her husband. There were David's cousins. There were Brittany's in-laws, her aunts, her friends. Even the neighbor from across the street was in the photos. Everyone except me. I called David, crying. I could not contain myself. "Why didn't you invite me?" There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end. "Mom, it's just that Brittany says you always make uncomfortable comments about her food and her way of decorating. She says you make her feel bad. We prefer to avoid the drama." "What comments? When have I said something bad?" "Well, one time you said her rice was too salty. Another time that her curtains were too dark. They are small things, Mom, but they add up." I was left speechless. Those were my great offenses. Casual comments that anyone makes in confidence. "Besides," continued David with a tone that froze my blood, "sometimes it is better for everyone to have their space. You have your life, we have ours." That night, I hugged the wool shawl my mother knitted before dying. I put it over my shoulders and rocked in my chair, looking at the dark garden, feeling like they were erasing me from my own family. The clock struck 11. Each chime rumbled in the silence of my empty house. And then just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, the phone rang 7 days after the forgotten barbecue. It was David. "Mom, I need $10,000 urgent." David's voice sounded different now. Urgent, needy. The same voice he used when he was a child and wanted something with desperation. "It is an investment opportunity I cannot let pass, Mom. A project from a coworker, safe. But I need the money this week. You know I always pay you back." I stayed silent, feeling the rage rising up my throat like hot lava. Always pays me back. The $10,000 I contributed for his wedding, he never returned. The $3,000 I lent him 2 years ago for the down payment on the car, not a dollar back. The $1,000 I gave as a loan for Brittany's dental treatment evaporated. And now, after excluding me from the barbecue for not being important people, he had the nerve to ask me for $10,000 more. "Mom, are you there? I need you to deposit it tomorrow morning to manage the transfer." Something inside me broke, but not like a plate that falls and makes noise. It broke like when an electrical wire snaps inside, silent, invisible, but definitive. "Son," I said with a calm that surprised even me. "I forgot to tell you that I don't have that money available. I only have money for important people." The silence on the other end was absolute. "What did you say?" "You heard me. I forgot to tell you, just like you forgot to tell me about the family gathering." "But Mom, this is serious. It is an investment." "It is not the same. For me, it is the same, David. For years, I have been important only when you need something. Money babysitting Mason, sewing a dress, lending my house. But for celebrations, for photos, for family there, I am not important people. Do not exaggerate. You have always been part of the family." "Oh, yeah. Then tell me, why didn't you invite me to Brittany's promotion party? Why did I spend Christmas Eve alone? Why did my cake for Mason's birthday end up in the trash?" "Those are different things, Mom. Do not mix everything." "No, son, they are not different things. It is all part of the same thing. You use me when it suits you and discard me when it doesn't." David exploded. "I cannot believe you are being so selfish. I am asking you for help, and you come at me with these soap opera dramas. I am your son, and I am your mother. But it seems that only matters when you need money." I hung up. My hands were trembling. My heart was beating so fast I could feel it in my temples. But for the first time in years, I was not crying from sadness. I was crying from rage, from indignation, from a strength I thought I had lost. The phone started ringing again. David. I let it ring until he got tired. Then I saw the WhatsApp messages coming in one after another. "Mom, don't be like this. Let's talk calmly. I swear this time I will pay you. Please, it is urgent. Brittany says you are being manipulative." That last message made me laugh so hard I had to sit down. Me, manipulative me, who gave everything without asking for anything in return. Me, who stayed quiet through every humiliation just to not cause problems. Me, who swallowed my pain so I wouldn't ruin their parties, their celebrations, their perfect life. I turned off the phone, and there, sitting in my living room, I started remembering all the times I was important to them. When Mason was a baby and Brittany had her weekend courses, which turned out to be trips with friends to the lake. Can you watch him for us, Olivia? We already paid for the hotel and there is no refund. I stayed with Mason from Friday afternoon until Sunday night. Diapers, bottles, sleepless nights. I was 63 years old then and my knees hurt from carrying the baby so much. When they needed me to sew Brittany's niece's dress for her prom. You sew so beautifully, Olivia, and the dressmakers charge a fortune. I spent 2 weeks working on that dress. Wine-colored taffeta, hand-embroidered on the bodice, perfect adjustments. I charged them only the cost of the fabric. They didn't even thank me when the niece won an award for the best dress. When David had that tax problem and needed a co-signer for a loan of $4,000. Just sign here, Mom. It is just a formality. I signed. Of course I signed. Turns out it wasn't just a formality. David didn't pay 2 monthly installments and the bank started calling me. I had to pay $1,500 from my pension so they wouldn't sue me. And the list went on and on. That night I counted in a notebook all the money I had lent them in the last 5 years. With a red pen, I wrote down every amount, every date, every promise of, I will pay you back next month. The total sum took my breath away. $25,000. Almost $25,000 that came out of my pension, my sewing from selling some of my mother's jewelry. Money I could have used to fix the roof that leaks in the rainy season, to change the old plumbing in the bathroom, to give myself even a small vacation. But no, I gave it all to them, hoping that would buy me a place at their table, in their life, in their heart. How foolish I was. I closed the notebook and put it in the drawer of my nightstand next to the deed to the house and my will. And then for the first time in a long time, I started thinking clearly. If they only looked for me when they needed something, then the day I had nothing to give, I would disappear completely from their lives unless I changed the rules of the game. And there, in that night of silence and contained courage, my plan began. 3 days passed since I hung up on David. 3 days where I ignored his calls, his messages, his attempts to make me feel guilty. Then he appeared at my door on a Wednesday afternoon. He rang the doorbell insistently, and when I opened it, his face was red with indignation. "Mom, we have to talk." "I have nothing to talk about, David. I already told you I don't have that money." "It is not just the money." He entered without being invited, walked straight to the living room, and dropped onto the couch as if it were his house. "Brittany is very upset with you." I remained standing in the doorframe, arms crossed. "Brittany is upset. And what did I do now?" "You told Aunt Grace that we treat you badly, that we exclude you from gatherings. Aunt Grace told my cousin Fern, and now the whole family is asking what is going on. You are making us look bad." The laugh that came out of my throat sounded bitter, even to me. "I am making you look bad, David. You didn't invite me to the barbecue. You didn't invite me to Brittany's party. I spent my life alone. Does that not seem like making me look bad?" "Those are exaggerations of yours, I told you. Sometimes it is better to have separate spaces." "But when you need money or for me to watch Mason, then there are no separate spaces, right?" He stood up furious. "You know what Brittany was right about you. She says you are manipulative, that you play the victim to control us. She says that since we got married, you have tried to meddle in our relationship." Those words hit me like stones. Meddle, David. I have only wanted to be part of the family. I have only wanted to see my grandson grow. I have only wanted... Well, your way of loving is very toxic, Mom. The silence that followed was so heavy it could almost be touched. Toxic. My voice came out barely as a whisper. Taking care of your son when you two went on trips is toxic. Lending you money you never return is toxic. Sewing free dresses for your wife's family is toxic. It is not about that. Then what is it about son? Explain to me how I went from being your mother to being a problem that has to be solved. David ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. Look, Mom, I came to ask you to stop talking bad about us with the family. And about the money. Seriously, I need it. It is to pay some credit cards that piled up on us. If I don't pay this week, they are going to charge us huge interest rates. There was the truth. It was no investment. It was debt. And why do you have debts that big? That is none of your business. Of course it is my business if you are asking for my money to pay them. God, Mom, why do you have to be so difficult? I just need you to help me this time, and that's it. This time, David, I have helped you 20 times, and not once have you fulfilled your promise to return the money. Because something always comes up. Mason needs something. We have to pay for school. We have to fix the car. Things cost money. Then stop spending on things you cannot pay for. Stop going to expensive restaurants, buying designer clothes, pretending to be what you are not. His eyes narrowed dangerously. You know what Brittany says, you are resentful because we have a better life than the one you had. She says that is why you always criticize us. That was too much. Get out of my house. What? I said for you to leave. Now. Mom. I said get out, David. And the next time you come, it will be because you really want to see me, not my wallet. He stood looking at me with a mixture of surprise and rage I had never seen in him. Finally, he took his keys and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned around. You know what Brittany told me when she met you, that you looked like one of those mothers-in-law who never let go of their children. And I told her no, that you were not like that, but I think she was right. The door closed and I was left alone in my living room, trembling from head to toe. I let myself fall into my chair by the window. The purple hydrangeas moved with the wind, indifferent to my pain. My grandmother's clock struck 5 times, and there, in that devastating silence, I understood something that split my soul. I had lost my son. Not to death, not to distance. I had lost him to a woman who convinced him that his mother was the problem, and he chose to believe her. I cried like I hadn't cried since Robert's death. I cried, hugging my mother's shawl that smelled of lavender and memories. I cried for all the years I gave without receiving, for all the times I stayed silent, not to cause problems, for all the humiliations I swallowed with a smile. But between the tears, something else was being born, a decision, a determination. Because if I had already lost them, if there was nothing left to save, then I had nothing to lose. And a woman who has nothing to lose is the most dangerous woman in the world. That night, I took out my notebook again, but now I did not just write down the money they owed me. I wrote down every humiliation, every exclusion, every lie. I wrote dates, names, witnesses, and started making calls. The first was to my sister, Grace. I need you to tell me everything Brittany has said about me at the family gatherings. Everything. Grace did not need begging. In a 2-hour call, my sister uncovered a world I had preferred not to see. Turns out, Brittany had been poisoning my image in front of the whole family for years. In the gatherings where I was not present, she dropped comments wrapped in concern. Poor Olivia, at that age, they get their weird ideas right. Or, oh, the mother-in-law always wants to have an opinion on how we raise Mason, but these are different times. Small drops of poison that over time formed a river. Last week, Grace told me with contained rage, at Fern's birthday party, Brittany said that you asked David to give you a monthly allowance because your pension is not enough. She said you played the victim to get money out of them. I was left speechless, me asking them for money. Grace, it is exactly the other way around. They are the ones who have taken almost $25,000 from me in 5 years. My sister sighed on the other side of the line. I know, Ollie. I have always known how the situation is. but Brittany is very good at flipping things. She has half the world eating out of her hand. That conversation opened my eyes. They hadn't just excluded me, they had defamed me. My own family believed I was a burden, a manipulator, a meddlesome mother-in-law, and I had been so busy trying to regain their love that I never defended my name. 2 days after that revelation, I received a message from David. Not a call, a WhatsApp message. "Mom, I thought about it better. I know we had a disagreement, but you are my mother, and you have always been there for me. I need to ask you a huge favor. Can you lend me the $10,000? It is urgent. This time I will sign a promissory note and pay you in 6 months with interest. Please." I read the message 3 times. I looked for the apology for calling me toxic. I looked for the acknowledgement of having excluded me. I looked for even a sorry for what I told you. There was none of that, only the request for money. I took my time to answer. In fact, I took 2 days. Finally, I wrote, "Son, I forgot to tell you that I allocated that money to other important things. I only have money for people who treat me with respect and value me. I hope you understand." The answer arrived in 30 seconds. "I cannot believe it. Seriously, are you going to do this to me?" "I am not doing anything to you, David. I am just applying the same rule as you, everyone with their own space. Remember." A wave of messages followed. First, he tried to make me feel guilty. "I am your only son, Mom. Are you going to let me fall like this?" Then he tried pity. "They are going to repossess the car if I don't pay." Finally came the attack. "Brittany is right. You are a resentful woman who cannot stand seeing us doing well." I did not respond to anything, but on the 3rd day I received a call from a number I did not know. I answered thinking it was a client from the workshop. "Olivia Ramirez." "Yes, who is speaking?" "I am Ernest Evans, an accountant. I am a friend of your friend Jacob. He asked me to call you." Jacob was David's godfather, an honest man who worked at a bank. "Tell me, Mr. Evans." "Look, your friend asked me to investigate something with discretion. Turns out your son and your daughter-in-law applied for a loan at the bank where I work. As part of the process, I reviewed their credit history." My blood froze. "And they have debts with 4 different credit cards. The total sum is $30,000. Also, they have a car loan overdue for 3 months. If they do not regularize their situation soon, the bank will proceed with the repossession." I felt the floor moving under my feet. $30,000. That is correct. And from what I see in the statements, most of that money went to trips, restaurants, clothes expenses that are not basic necessities. I thanked him for the information and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table processing what I had just heard. They not only had huge debts, but they had built those debts living a life of luxury they could not afford. And now they wanted me with my widow's pension and my life savings to save their ship while they kept making holes in it. That night, I could not sleep. I stayed looking at the ceiling of my bedroom, listening to the tick-tock of my grandmother's clock from the living room. Each chime reminded me of my grandmother's words. "As long as this clock keeps telling the time, the family will remain united. But what family? A family where they used me as a bank. A family where they defamed me behind my back. A family where my own son preferred to believe his wife rather than defend me. No. That was not a family. It was an illusion that I had insisted on keeping alive. And illusions, however beautiful they may be, do not pay bills or cure broken hearts. The next day I did something I had never done. I asked for an appointment with my lawyer, Mr. Davis attended me in his office downtown. He was a man of 60, discreet and professional, who had helped my family with paperwork since my father was alive. "Mrs. Olivia, how can I help you?" "I need to review my will and I need to protect my assets." The lawyer nodded and took out a folder. "Tell me what you have in mind." I explained everything, from the exclusions to the debts I discovered. From the loans they never returned to Brittany's defamation campaign. Mr. Davis listened without interrupting, taking notes. When I finished, he took off his glasses and looked at me with something that looked like respect. "Mrs. Olivia, what you are living is more common than you think. Many older adults are seen as ATMs by their own children. My advice is that you protect your assets now before it is too late. What do you recommend? First, change your will. Second, create a trust for your grandson. Third, leave everything documented and with witnesses." Okay, we spent 2 hours reviewing options. In the end, I made decisions I never thought I would make. But before executing the plan, I needed one more thing: evidence. I called my friend Rachel, a woman of my age who had been my confidant for 30 years. I asked her to be a witness to something I was about to do. "What do you have in mind, Ollie?" "I'm going to record every conversation I have with David from now on. I need the truth to be documented." Rachel taught me how to use the voice recorder on my phone, and so, armed with a legal plan and evidence that would accumulate, I prepared for the moment that would change everything. Because if I had learned something in these months of pain, it was this: love is not begged for, it is honored. And I had begged enough. Now it was time for them to learn what it meant to lose me. The following 3 weeks were of absolute silence between David and me. Not a call, not a message. It was as if I had died to them, too. But I was not sitting with my arms crossed. Rachel turned out to be an invaluable ally. Between the two of us, we started gathering proof as if we were detectives in a movie, only this was my real life. "Look," she told me one afternoon while we drank coffee in my kitchen, "if you are going to do this, do it right. You need it so no one can say you are inventing things." She was right. First, I took out all the bank transfer receipts I had made to them over 5 years. Each deposit was there in black and white. $25,000 that left my account to theirs. In none of them was there a receipt of return. Then I searched my workshop for all the sewing jobs I had done for free for Brittany's family. I found photos of the niece's prom dress, the cousin's christening suit, the curtains I made for their house. I calculated how much I would have charged if they were normal clients. $5,000 in free work. Then there was the time I watched Mason. Rachel helped me make a chronological list. It turned out that in the last 3 years, I watched my grandson for a total of 86 full days. If they had hired a nanny, it would have cost them at least $100 a day. That added up to another $8,600. "Do you realize, Ollie," said Rachel while we added it up, "you have given them the equivalent of almost $40,000 between money and services, and not a thank you in return." Seeing that number turned my stomach. But the most revealing part came when Grace, finally fed up with Brittany's lies, decided to help me. "I'm going to record what she says at the next gathering," she whispered to me on the phone. "There is going to be a lunch on Sunday at our cousin Fern's house. I am going to carry my cell phone recording in my purse." On Sunday, Grace arrived at my house at 6 in the afternoon with the audio. What I heard took my breath away. It was Brittany's voice, clear and loud. "Oh, girls, you do not know the drama Olivia is putting me through. Now it turns out she is mad, because we did not invite her to a gathering, as if at her age she needs to be going from party to party. Daniel has explained to her 1,000 times that we need our space, but she just does not understand." Then another voice, which I recognized as my cousin Fiona. "But does she not ask you for money often?" Exactly, that is the worst part. She asks us for help with her expenses. She says her pension is not enough, and when Daniel tells her we cannot help her all the time, she goes into victim mode. It is exhausting. I had to pause the recording because my hands were shaking. "Keep going," Grace urged me. "Wait for what comes next." I hit play again. Brittany continued. "The thing is, Olivia never really worked. She only sewed every now and then. She does not know what it is like to have big responsibilities. And now she wants us people with children and real expenses to support her. But oh well, she is Daniel's mom. We just have to put up with her." Laughter in the background. That was Fiona. "Oh, friend, you have such patience." Brittany replied. Do not even get me started. The other day she wanted us to house sit for her because she was going to the doctor. Watch her house. She lives in a safe neighborhood. Nobody's going to rob her, but she is super dramatic about everything. More laughter. I stopped the recording. Grace hugged me while I tried to process the magnitude of the betrayal. They had not only stolen my money, they had stolen my reputation, my dignity, my truth. What are you going to do? Asked Grace. I am going to keep gathering proof. I answered with a calmness I did not know I had. And when I have everything ready, I am going to call a family meeting, but not just any meeting, one where everyone will hear the truth. That week I visited Mr. Miller, the attorney again. I showed him everything I had compiled. Mrs. Olivia, this is enough for a legal case if you wanted to sue them for the money. I do not want to sue them, I said. I want them to see who the manipulator really has been here, and I want to make sure they can never use my name or my house for their benefits again. The lawyer smiled slightly. Then let us proceed with the plan we discussed. I signed documents, many documents. With every signature, I felt lighter, as if I were letting go of chains I had carried for years. The trust fund for Matthew was established. My house would be inherited by my grandson, but he could only access it when he turns 25. In the meantime, it would be administered by Grace and Mr. Miller. Daniel and Brittany would not touch a single brick. What if they try to contest the will? I asked. With all this documentation, it would be very difficult for them to win. Besides, we have witnesses to the situation of financial and emotional abuse that you have lived through. I walked out of that office with a thick folder under my arm and a weight off my heart. But the hardest part was missing. The confrontation. I decided it would be at my house on my territory. I would invite the whole family, Grace, Fiona, my cousins, the uncles, and of course Daniel and Brittany. I would tell them I had an important announcement regarding my will. That would make them come running, thinking I was finally going to leave them everything. What a surprise they were in for. I prepared the invitations with care. A simple group text message. Important family meeting on Saturday, June 20th at 4 in the afternoon at my house. I have to announce decisions regarding my assets. It is important that everyone is present. The responses arrived almost immediately. Grace, I will be there, sister. Fiona, so much intrigue, Auntie. See you there. And the message I was waiting for from Daniel. We will be there, Mom. Is everything okay? I replied with the same coldness he had used with me so many times. Everything is perfect, son. See you on Saturday. I spent the following days preparing my house. I cleaned every corner. I pruned the purple wisteria bushes that were lush. More than ever, I baked cornbread and prepared iced sweet tea. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted them to see, perhaps for the last time, what my house was like when there was love and dignity in it. Rebecca came to help me on Friday. Are you sure about this, Liv? More sure than ever. What if they get mad? What if Daniel stops talking to you for good? I stopped in the middle of the living room holding the duster in my hand. Rebecca, he already stopped talking to me. He only looks for me when he wants something. If I lose him after this, I actually lose nothing because what we had between us, I lost that a long time ago. My friend nodded with tears in her eyes. That night before sleeping, I stood in front of my grandmother's grandfather clock. I cleaned it carefully, running a soft cloth over the mahogany wood. Grandma, I whispered, you said that as long as this clock kept telling time, the family would stay united. But sometimes you have to let things break so they can be put back together in the right way. The clock struck 11 times, just as it had done for more than 100 years, and I, for the first time in a long time, went to sleep in peace, because I knew that on Saturday, whatever happened, I would finally speak my truth. Saturday dawned with a clear sky, the type of perfect day that seems unreal, as if the universe wanted to give me one last push of confidence. I woke up early, took a long bath, and put on my terracotta-colored dress, the one Robert gave me for our last anniversary. I had not worn it since his funeral, but that day I felt it was the right moment. I tied my mother's wool shawl over my shoulders and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was no longer the same one who begged for love 3 months ago. This woman had a straight back and clear eyes. At 2 in the afternoon, Rebecca arrived with her husband Hector to help me with the final preparations. "Do you have everything ready?" she asked while we arranged the chairs in the living room. I pointed toward the dining table. There was the manila envelope that contained my future and theirs. Inside, there were copies of all the documents, bank statements, transfer receipts, photographs with dates of my sewing jobs, the transcribed recording of Brittany defaming me, and of course the new will certified by Mr. Miller. "Everything is ready," I replied. At 3:30, the family started to arrive. Grace was the first. She gave me a long hug and whispered in my ear, "I am proud of you, sister." Fiona arrived with her husband, Curious. The uncles, the cousins, everyone kept filling my living room with that anticipatory murmur of, who knows that something important is going to happen but does not know what. At 4 o'clock sharp, as if they had calculated their arrival to make an entrance, Daniel and Brittany rang the doorbell. I saw them through the curtain before opening. Brittany was wearing an impeccable white dress and high heels, Daniel dress pants and a pressed shirt. They came dressed for a celebration. How wrong they were. "Hi, Mom," said Daniel when I opened the door, giving me a kiss on the cheek that tasted like acting. Olivia greeted Brittany with that smile that no longer fooled me. "Come in, everyone is here." I guided them to the living room. I saw how Brittany evaluated those present, with her gaze greeting everyone with her fake charm. They sat in the main armchair as if they were the guests of honor. I stood in front of everyone next to my grandmother's clock, which marked exactly 4:10. "Thank you all for coming. I know I said I had an announcement about my assets, and that is true. But before we get to that, I need you to listen to a few things." Silence settled in immediately. All eyes were on me. I took a deep breath. 3 months ago, I called my son to ask him when the family barbecue would be. He answered that it had been the day before and that they had forgotten to tell me because there were only important people there. I saw how Brittany tensed up. Daniel looked at the floor. That phrase broke something inside me, but what I did not know then was that this exclusion was only the tip of a much larger iceberg. I picked up the manila envelope from the table. In this envelope, I have documents that show the truth of what my relationship with my son and my daughter-in-law has been for the last 5 years. A murmur ran through the room. First, we have the bank receipts. In 5 years, I have lent Daniel $10,000. Money he asked me for the down payment on his car for his wedding, for dental treatments, for emergencies that were never emergencies. Money he promised to pay me back and that I never saw again. I took out the sheets and passed them to Grace so they could circulate. Daniel went pale. "Mom, it is not necessary. Let me finish, son." Second, I have here the photographs of all the sewing jobs I did for free for Brittany's family. If I had charged a fair price, it would be $2,000. Third, there is the calculation of the time I babysat Matthew while you two went on trips. 86 full days, which at a babysitter's rate equals $2,500. The sheets were passing from hand to hand. I could see the looks of astonishment on my cousins' faces, the indignation from Grace. That adds up to nearly $15,000 in money and services I gave expecting only one thing: to be part of this family. Brittany tried to interrupt. "Olivia, this is—" I raised my hand. "I have not finished. I also have something very interesting here." I took out the transcript of the recording. This is what Brittany said about me at a family gathering 2 weeks ago, a gathering to which, of course, I was not invited. I began to read out loud. Every word she had said about me being a burden about me, asking them for money about me being dramatic and manipulative. The silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. When I finished reading, Brittany was red with fury and embarrassment. That is taken out of context, she stammered. Really? Because I have the full audio here if anyone wants to listen to it. Fiona, my niece looked at her with contempt. Brittany, you just made a fool of yourself. Daniel finally exploded. Mom, this is a public humiliation. Is this what you brought us here for? No, son, I brought you here to hear the truth. A truth that has been hidden under lies for too long. I walked up to him and looked him straight in the eyes. You called me toxic. You told me I was manipulative. You excluded me from your life while taking every single dollar you could from me. And when I finally said no, you threatened me saying Brittany was right about me. Tears began to roll down my cheeks, but my voice did not shake. I am not the toxic one, Daniel. I am the one who raised you alone after your father died. I am the one who worked sewing until my fingers ached so you could have a good education. I am the one who was always there when you needed me. Brittany stood up. I'm not going to listen to this anymore. Sit down, said Grace with a voice that allowed no reply. You are going to listen to everything. Brittany stayed standing, but she did not leave. I took the last document out of the envelope. And now comes the part about the assets I promised to announce. All eyes were fixed on the document I held in my hands. I saw how Daniel and Brittany leaned forward expectant, probably thinking that after this whole dramatic scene I would still end up leaving them everything because that is how mothers are. How little they really knew me. This I said, raising the certified paper is my new will signed and notarized before Mr. Miller 2 weeks ago. The lawyer, who had arrived discreetly a few minutes earlier and was standing by the door, nodded. In this will, I have made very important decisions about my assets, and I want everyone to know them, so there is no confusion in the future. Daniel swallowed audibly. My house. This house I inherited from my parents, and which has been the home of this family for 3 generations, will be inherited entirely by my grandson, Matthew Cortez. The silence was broken by Brittany's exclamation. What let me finish? The house will be placed in a trust administered by my sister Grace and Mr. Miller until Matthew turns 25. At that moment, he will decide what to do with it. Meanwhile, I will live here until my death, and afterwards the house will remain under legal custody until my grandson reaches the stipulated age. That is unfair, screamed Brittany, completely forgetting her composure. Daniel is your only son. It is his right. A right is earned with respect and dignity, not with humiliations and lies, I replied calmly, and if you allow me to continue. Daniel was pale as a ghost, but he said nothing. Second, my grandmother's antique clock, this piece that has marked our family's hours for over 100 years, will not be inherited by anyone in particular. It will be donated to the local history museum downtown, where all family members can visit it, but no one can sell it or claim it as their own. I saw how Brittany's eyes filled with tears of rage. I knew she had already planned to sell that clock. A piece like that could easily be worth $5,000 or more in the antiques market. Third, regarding the $10,000 that Daniel owes me, I have decided to forgive that debt. Daniel looked up, hopeful. But I continued that forgiveness comes with a condition. This is the last thing you will receive from me in financial terms. There will be no more loans, no more financial aid, no more free sewing jobs. From this moment on, our relationship will be strictly family, not financial. Mom Daniel started, I have not finished. Fourth, I have established a savings account for Matthew's college education. $1,500 that I set aside from my pension over the last year. That account can only be accessed by him when he turns 18 and solely for educational expenses. Neither you nor anyone else can touch that money. Grace was smiling with pride. Fiona and the uncles nodded in approval. And fifth, I have established a visitation schedule with my grandson. a supervised video call every week for 30 minutes, and an in-person visit of 2 hours every 15 days here at my house. These visits will be supervised by Grace or by Rebecca to ensure they actually happen and that Matthew is okay. Supervised, Brittany exploded. Now it turns out, you do not trust us as parents. No, I replied, looking her straight in the eyes. I do not trust you as intermediaries between my grandson and me. For 3 years you have used Matthew as an excuse to ask me for favors, but you have denied me real access to him. That is over. Mr. Miller stepped forward. Everything Mrs. Olivia just mentioned is legally documented and certified. Any attempt to contest these provisions will be very difficult to sustain in court, especially with all the evidence she has compiled of financial and emotional abuse. Brittany stood up abruptly, her heels clicking against the tile floor. This is ridiculous. Daniel, let's go. We are not going to stay here to listen to your mother humiliate us. But Daniel did not move. He was sitting with his head in his hands. Daniel, I told you we are leaving. Wait, he murmured. For the first time since all this started, I saw something in my son's eyes that I had not seen in years. Shame. He stood up slowly and looked at me. Mom, I did not know you felt that way. The bitter chuckles of several people in the room resonated at that statement. You did not know, asked Grace incredulously. You did not know that excluding your mother from family gatherings would make her feel bad. You did not know that asking her for money constantly without paying her back was wrong. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. I walked closer to him. Despite everything, he was still my son, the boy I carried in my arms, whom I nursed when he was sick, whom I comforted when he cried. Daniel, I love you. That is never going to change. But I am not going to allow you to keep treating me like an ATM with feelings. I am not going to keep begging for a place in your life. But you are my mom. Exactly. I am your mom, not your maid, nor your bank. And it is time you understand the difference. Brittany grabbed Daniel by the arm. You heard what she wanted to say. Let's go. But before they could take a step, Matthew ran in from the garden where he had been playing with Fiona's children. Grandma Olivia. My heart melted upon seeing him. My 7-year-old grandson, with his bright eyes and uncomplicated smile, hugged my legs. Can we eat the cornbread you baked? It smells so good. I crouched down to his level and hugged him tight. Of course, my love. Go with your Aunt Grace to the kitchen. She will give you a piece. Are you not coming? In a moment. First, I have to finish talking to your dad. Matthew ran off toward the kitchen, oblivious to all the tension in the room. When I turned back, Brittany was looking at me with pure hate. This is not going to stay like this, Olivia. You are going to regret humiliating us in front of the whole family. The only thing I regret, I replied with a firm voice, is having stayed silent for so long, having allowed you to treat me the way you did, having put your comfort before my dignity. I turned toward everyone present. I want all of you to be witnesses to what was said here today. Because I know Brittany will try to flip this story, make me look like the bad guy, but now everyone knows the truth. Murmurs of support ran through the room. Fiona stood up. Aunt Olivia, everyone here is with you. What you did today took a lot of courage. Grace walked over and took my hand. My sister is right. It was about time someone put a stop to this abuse. Daniel finally spoke with a broken voice. Mom, I need time to process all this. You have all the time in the world, son, but if you want to have a relationship with me again, it is going to be on my terms, with respect, with honesty, without manipulations. Let's go, Daniel, insisted Brittany, pulling on his arm. This time, he let himself be led away. I watched them walk toward the door. Before leaving, Daniel turned back one last time. Can I come talk to you this week? You can come whenever you want, son, but only if you come to really talk, not to ask for money. He nodded and left. When the door closed behind them, I felt all the weight of the last few months finally lifting from my shoulders. My grandmother's clock struck 5 times, and for the first time in a long time, that sound brought me peace instead of sadness. The days after the family meeting were strange. A different silence filled my house, but it was no longer the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of peace. Grace came over every day to drink coffee with me. Fiona called me to tell me that the whole family was on the side of truth. Rebecca practically moved into my house during that first week, making sure I was okay. From Daniel, not a word for 5 days. Until Thursday afternoon, he appeared at my door alone without Brittany. He had swollen eyes, as if he had not slept well in days. "Can I come in, Mom?" I stepped aside without saying anything. We sat in the living room in the same spot where I had exposed all the truths. My grandmother's clock showed 4 in the afternoon. Daniel rubbed his hands nervously. I had to kick Brittany out of the house for a few days. I looked at him surprised. After the meeting, we went home and fought for hours. She said you were manipulative, that all this was theater to make her look bad. But I could not keep believing her anymore. His voice cracked. I was reviewing our bank statements. You were right about everything. The debts, the unnecessary expenses, the way we were living beyond our means. Brittany had told me we were fine, but we are about to have the car repossessed and possibly the house. And you just realized this. I realized it before Mom, but I did not want to see it. It was easier to believe her, to blame you, to justify everything with excuses. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. I called Aunt Grace. I asked her if everything you said was true. She confirmed every single thing. The times you supposedly spoke ill of me to her never existed. It was all Brittany defaming you and I let her do it. The pain in his voice was genuine, but I had learned not to get carried away just by emotions. And now, what Daniel? Are you here to ask for forgiveness, expecting everything to go back to how it was before? No. I came to tell you that you were right about everything, and that I understand if you do not want to know anything about me anymore. That took me by surprise. I was a terrible son. I used you, I ignored you, I humiliated you, and the worst part is I let my wife treat you worse than I would ever allow anyone to treat a stranger, much less my mother. He stood up and walked toward the window, looking at the purple wisteria. My dad would have given me a tremendous beating if he saw how I treated you. He always said you were the strongest woman he knew, and I saw you as weak, as someone I could take advantage of. What happened with Brittany, I asked her to go to her parents' house for a while. I need to think clearly. I need to decide if I want to stay in a marriage built on lies and appearances. Matthew asks about you every day. My heart clenched. How is he confused? He does not understand why suddenly he cannot see his grandma. I told him it was my fault, that I made very big mistakes. We stayed in silence for several minutes. Only the tick-tock of the clock filled the space. Mom, I am not coming to ask you to forgive me. I do not even know if I deserve it. I just came to tell you that I am going to try to be better. I am going to fix the disaster of my life. I am going to seek help to handle the debts, and I am going to make sure that Matthew grows up knowing the grandma, that I had not the mother-in-law that Brittany invented. I walked over to him and put my hand on his shoulder. Son, I never said I did not want you in my life. I only said I was not going to allow any more abuse. If you really want to change, I am going to support you. But things are going to be different. I know, and I accept it. The visits with Matthew stay supervised for 3 months. Afterwards, we will evaluate. Understood. No loans. If you have financial problems, find an advisor. I am not your solution. I will never ask you for money again, Mom. I swear it on my dad's memory. And about Brittany, that is your decision. But if you two stay together, she is going to have to earn my respect again. It is not going to be automatic. I understand. She has a lot to change, and if she cannot do it, then I will have to make difficult decisions. I hugged him. My son, my only son. broken, regretful, but finally seeing the truth. I love you, Daniel. I am always going to love you, but love does not mean allowing them to destroy you. I love you, Mom, and I am sorry. I am truly so sorry. We cried together, a cry that washed away years of pain, lies, and misunderstandings. When he left that afternoon, I felt different, not completely healed, but on the right path. 6 months later. Saturday morning dawned fresh. I put on my sewing apron and opened the windows of my workshop to let the air in. There was a group of 5 ladies from the neighborhood waiting in my living room. They were my new students. After everything that happened, I decided to turn my workshop into something bigger. A space where women of all ages could learn to sew, but also where they could talk, support each other, share their stories. "Good morning, ladies," I greeted them as I entered with a tray of fresh coffee and pastries. "Good morning, Teacher Olivia," they answered in unison. That is what they called me now, teacher. I liked it. While I taught them how to do the perfect hem on a skirt, I heard the front door. Grandma. It was Matthew. Daniel walked in behind him, alone. Brittany and he had separated 3 months ago. It was a difficult but necessary decision. She refused to accept any responsibility for what she had done, and my son finally found the courage to draw a line. My love. I left the fabric and ran to hug my grandson. Grandma. "Look what I made at school." He showed me a drawing of a house with purple wisteria. "It is your house." The teacher said to draw our favorite place. My eyes filled with tears. It is the most beautiful drawing I have ever seen in my life. Daniel smiled. He looked different, thinner, a little tired, but with clearer eyes. "Can I talk to you for a moment, Ma?" I left Matthew with the ladies who received him with sweets and attention and went out to the garden with my son. I got a second job, he told me, at night as a project consultant. It is heavy, but with that, I will be able to pay off the debts in 2 years instead of 5. I am glad you are taking responsibility. I also started therapy. The psychologist has helped me understand many things about how I behaved with you, about how I let Brittany manipulate me about everything. I hugged him. "I am proud of you, son. Mom." I know 6 months have passed, but I want you to know that I think about what happened every day, and every day I work to be the son you deserve. You already are, Daniel. The simple fact that you are trying to change already makes you the son I always knew you could be. My grandmother's clock struck 11 times from inside the house. Matthew ran out to the garden. "Grandma, the ladies say you are teaching them to make embroidered coasters like yours. Can I stay and watch?" "Of course, my love." The 3 of us went back inside. Daniel sat in a corner watching how I taught. Matthew was fascinated with the colored threads. That afternoon, after everyone left, I stayed alone in my workshop. I took my mother's wool shawl and put it over my shoulders. I walked toward the living room and stood in front of the empty space on the wall where my grandmother's clock used to hang. I had donated it to the Historical Society Museum last week in a small ceremony. The whole family was there. Father Lawrence said some beautiful words about the importance of preserving family memory without clinging to objects, and although that clock was no longer on my wall, I could hear its chimes in my memory. Every ring reminded me that my grandmother was right. The family stays united, not because of a clock, but because of love, respect, and dignity. I looked out the window toward the purple wisteria swaying in the wind. My house was no longer the center of big gatherings like before, but it was something better. It was a refuge of peace, a place of teaching, a space where my dignity lived intact. Daniel came every Saturday with Matthew. We sat down to eat. We talked about life, about challenges, about dreams. There were no more secrets, no lies, no manipulations, only real conversations between mother, son, and grandson. Grace organized small family gatherings once a month. Everyone respected my space and my time, and me, I had finally learned that true love is not begged for nor bought with money or favors. True love is honored with presence, respect, and coherent actions. I sat in my chair by the window, the same one where I cried so many nights of loneliness. But now when I sat there, I did not feel sadness. I felt gratitude. Gratitude for having found the courage to say no. Gratitude for having defended my dignity when everyone expected me to stay silent. Gratitude for having realized that it was better to be alone with peace than accompanied by pain. The afternoon sun came through the window, illuminating the colored threads in my workshop. Tomorrow I would have new students. Next week, Matthew would come to stay for the whole weekend, something Daniel proposed, and which I accepted with clear conditions. Life continued different from how I had imagined it, but infinitely better than the nightmare I woke up from 6 months ago. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, feeling my mother's shawl on my shoulders, imagining my grandmother smiling at me from wherever she was. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered. I recovered my dignity, and in that moment of perfect silence, I knew that was the best inheritance I could leave Matthew. Not a house, not an antique clock, but the example of a woman who learned to value herself. Because true wealth is not in what you possess, it is in what you do not allow them to take away. Final reflection. If this story touched your heart, if you recognized in it pieces of your own life or that of someone you love, I want you to know something. It is never too late to recover your dignity. It does not matter how many years you have stayed silent, how many times you have said yes when you wanted to say no, how much love you have given expecting crumbs in return. You can always change the rules of the game, because valuing yourself is not selfishness, it is survival. Setting boundaries is not cruelty, it is self-love. And walking away from those who hurt you, even if they are family, is not abandonment, it is choosing yourself. Today, I invite you to reflect. Is there someone in your life who treats you like Brittany and Daniel treated Olivia? Is there someone who only looks for you when they need something? If the answer is yes, this is your moment to wake up, to take inventory of your life, to decide that you deserve more. And if you know someone who is living this situation, share this story. Sometimes hearing another person's pain gives us the courage to face our own. Leave me a comment. Where are you watching me from? Did this story remind you of someone? What decision would you make in Olivia's place? Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel to keep sharing real-life stories that teach us, move us, and remind us that we are never alone in our battles. Remember, love that does not value you is not love, it is habit. And you deserve more than habit. You deserve dignity. You deserve respect. You deserve peace. Until the next story, and may you never forget, your value is not defined by who hurts you, but by who decides to honor you. The end.